Today I came home completely exhausted. Work was very stressful. As soon as I opened the door, I realized that my mother-in-law had come to see me. Her irritated voice came from the hallway. As I entered the house, I greeted her and quickly realized the reason for her displeasure. On the bed lay my drunken wife, Claire. She was snapping at her mother's cries, and the two of them were engaged in a noisy confrontation that made my fatigue even worse. I thought wistfully of the night ahead. My mother-in-law, Margaret, would eventually leave, and my dear wife would be awake enough to snuggle up to me, still under the influence of the wine haze. Trying to distract myself, I went to the kitchen to prepare something to eat. To my surprise, Margaret had already taken care of dinner, leaving the table perfectly set and the food warm. This unexpected gesture lightened my mood. I invited Margaret to join me at the table. She walked in a few minutes later, just as I finished setting the table. We sat down, and for the first time that day, I felt a semblance of peace. Margaret's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos that had reigned earlier. I poured her a small glass of French cognac to thank her for her efforts. She smiled gratefully and sipped from the glass with pleasure, so I poured her another. As we talked, the tension of the evening began to ease, and we shared a moment of genuine connection. Margaret's laughter was soft but warm, filling the small kitchen with a soothing energy. While Margaret washed the dishes, I went to check on Claire. She was lying on the bed with her shirt pulled up, looking completely unkempt and still sound asleep. I sighed, covered her with a blanket, and lingered for a moment. The scene seemed surreal. My wife, who was usually full of life, had gotten to this state. With nothing left to do, I decided to take a shower and clear my mind. Rinsing quickly, I walked out of the bathroom and almost ran into Margaret. Our apartment has a narrow hallway where the bathroom and toilet are located, and I guess I scared her as much as she scared me. For a moment we froze, being a few centimeters apart. Margaret had changed into one of Claire's robes to make cleaning easier, and the sight was unexpected. She looked completely different, almost unfamiliar, which took me by surprise. Her usually demure appearance had been replaced by something softer, more casual, and it emphasized her natural beauty. Margaret, a tall and strikingly beautiful woman with long legs and a narrow waist, had always caught my eye. It was hard to believe she was Claire's mother. She had an annoying habit of hiding her figure under shapeless dresses and skirts combined with outdated tights. Despite the many beautiful outfits Claire and I had given her over the years, she rarely wore them. The only time I ever saw Margaret dressed in a way that showed off her beauty was on a nature trip where she was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. Now this memory came to mind, and unexpectedly so. Margaret was 43 years old, but she could easily outshine women much younger. Claire and I had been married for 3 years, and although I adored my wife, there were times when my thoughts drifted to her mother. These thoughts were always fleeting, dismissed as pipe dreams. Margaret's puritanical upbringing kept such thoughts in check. And yet here we were, the boundaries blurred in the dim light of the hallway. Returning to the hallway, I accidentally pressed Margaret against the wall, not realizing how close she was. For a moment we both froze. The expression on Margaret's face changed from surprise to something unreadable. As she came to her senses, something inside me changed too. Maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe it was something deeper. A long-buried thought resurfaced. After a few seconds, I snapped back to reality, muttered an apology, and retreated to my room. I sat in my room, immersed in frantic thoughts, unsure of what to do next. The air felt heavy with unspoken tension. Then Margaret entered and quietly closed the door behind her. Her expression was calm, but her presence reeked of electricity. There was no need to say anything at that moment. The silence spoke volumes, and we both realized that something irreversible had just happened. The next morning I awoke to the smell of food. Margaret was in the kitchen making scrambled eggs, moving with a calm efficiency that didn't match the emotions of the previous night. Claire was still asleep, clearly recovering from the night's excesses. None of that mattered to me anymore. I joined Margaret in the kitchen and smiled silently at her, to which she responded with a knowing look. As I sat down to eat, one thing was clear to me. This would not be the last omelet Margaret would make for me. The morning was serene. Margaret's presence was soothing, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She placed a plate in front of me with a grace that seemed almost intimate. While I took the first bite, she sat across from me, sipping her coffee. Silence hung between us, but the unspoken understanding from the night before still hung in the air. I knew this was just the beginning of something that would change the dynamics of our family forever.